already to enable a very free-flowing conversation. In our first roundtable a couple of months ago, we experimented with two different approaches. One was wide open, everybody had their mics off that want to be off and can discuss freely and interrupt with questions. And then we tried it with everybody muted and submitting questions through the chat window, etc. If you prefer to mute yourself, that's perfectly fine. Just unmute yourself to raise questions or comments or submit those via the Zoom chat feature, which I'll demonstrate for you in a few minutes here. If the conversation becomes a little too lively, a little too free and difficult to hear or understand, we may fall back to that second option, which is to mute everyone and everybody literally just raise your hand like back in school or submit your questions and comments through the chat window. There's actually two features in Zoom that you should be aware of if you're not yet. At the bottom of your Zoom window, and by the way, I am in, what do they call this view? Gallery view, in case that is of any help to you guys. It's pretty neat because you can see, right now I've got 16 of you in my view. So you get to see everybody's faces and you can switch that with the little view indicator in the upper right-hand corner. Clear?
Some of the locations, Todd,
yeah.
Some of the locations for appear in different places, like on the top right or on the bottom.
Yeah, I cut myself off there. Right, so there's, if you mouse over the bottom edge of your Zoom window, you will see a feature bar, a toolbar pop up, and there are features in the bottom, one of which is chat. And
no, but sometimes they appear on the top, depending upon whether you're on an iPad or a workstation or a laptop. Those appear either at the bottom of the screen or in the upper right.
Fair enough. Thank you for that, Robin. So chat is I thought there was going to be a Q&A, which is prevalent in the webinar model, but in the meeting scenario that we've got going here, chat is your option. So there's a chat window at the bottom, and in fact, I will give you a quick example by sending everyone a message. And right now that message is, if you haven't yet, please donate to PD Active.
Mm-hmm.
So let me keep going with my notes here and we'll get started right away. So that's the chat feature. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, but I'll mention it again now that we're recording. This session will be and is being recorded, and it will be eventually posted on the pdactive.org website and or our YouTube channel in the next few days. I'll send out that link as we get into the discussion here, the link to the YouTube channel. Finally, as I mentioned a moment ago, PD Active does depend on donations to bring programs like this to our members free of charge. And we remain grateful for your contributions. If you have not yet had a chance to make the suggested registration donation of $10 for this roundtable, that link, as you saw, is now in the chat window. Today's session is entitled Exercise and Motivation During COVID, Avoiding Apathy and Depression. One important disclaimer with that title is that while Claire and Nate, whom I'll introduce to you in a moment, are both highly trained and experienced in physical therapy and its benefits to those of us with PD, they are not trained psychologists and as such will not be offering medical diagnosis of or treatment for apathy or depression. However, we do look forward to a lively discussion from all of you on those and related topics. So there we go, Claire and Nate. I CYA'd a little bit there for us. Now, without further delay, PD Active is pleased to introduce to you our panelists for today's roundtable, Claire McLean and Nate Coomer. Claire and Nate, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So why don't you both take a moment to introduce yourselves, tell us about the work you do currently around PD, how you got there, and why you think exercise is important at all for PD, let alone during a pandemic like this. Claire, let's start with you. And by the way, as the folks are introducing themselves, I will post links of their businesses, their online services in the same chat tool in Zoom. And then we will also be sending those out after the fact, after the presentation. So we'll all see that again and again. So Claire, why don't we start with you?
All right. My name is Claire McLean, and like Todd said, I'm a physical therapist. I have been specializing working with people with Parkinson's since I graduated from physical therapy school in 2007. So I was fortunate to go to the University of Southern California for physical therapy school, which is one of the places that was doing some of the earliest research showing that exercise not only was beneficial, but actually could have a positive impact on the brain and induce positive neuroplasticity. And so I went to physical therapy school learning that people with Parkinson's could get better. And that was not necessarily the kind of general thought out there in the medical community or even with physical therapists at the time. And there's still a lot of work to do in kind of showing everyone what is possible with the right type of physical therapy and exercise and how those work together but are not the exact same thing. So I went to USC, and then I've worked in a number of different settings. I've worked on research projects in outpatient clinical settings and on movement disorders teams at a local community hospital here in Orange County, California, which is where I live now. And so during that time, right from when I first graduated, I took the LSVT Big course. That was the very first continuing education course I ever taught as a new grad. And I started implementing this kind of more intensive program than what was previously done in most cases in physical therapy. And the people I was working with were getting better. And not only was I a new grad and I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing, but a lot of people were saying, I've been to physical therapy before, it didn't really help that much. And what I'm doing here now is different. And that was just me taking, this protocol, the LSVT Big protocol, and implementing it. So that was really exciting.
What does that acronym stand for, Claire, if I can just interrupt?
Yeah, the Lee Silverman Voice Treatment is actually what LSVT stands for. So LSVT Global as a company was started by speech therapists, and they initially developed the LSVT Loud program like 20 years ago, a long time ago. So it started with a speech therapist who was, she really trained performers. And so she started working with this woman who had Parkinson's, and she was teaching her, seeing, okay, this woman's voice is quieter than it should be. It's difficult to understand and to hear her. Can we train her to overcome that? And so they did this intensive voice training program. And it was a woman who had had Parkinson's a long time. Her voice was quite affected. And they did this intensive program. They trained every day, 5 days a week, for a month, and this woman had a huge improvement in her voice. And so since that initial woman that they worked with, her name was Lee Silverman. So that's where the whole acronym came from. So ever since they worked with that first woman, they then went on to do quite a bit of research and show that not only is this speech therapy effective, but there's this spread of effects to other things like facial expression and gesturing and swallowing and other things that aren't necessarily directly trained. So LSVT Loud was a therapy that existed. And one of my mentors, Becky Farley, lived in Tucson, Arizona, where one of the founders of LSVT Global was as a speech therapist. And Becky Farley saw the LSVT Loud program and how effective it was and said, can we apply this to the body? At that time, they kind of knew exercise was helpful for people with Parkinson's, but it was more thought that it was like, okay, well, we'll stretch and that'll feel good and that'll help you move a little bit better. But there wasn't this thought really that we could provide exercise in a way that would really help people get better and stay better over the course of having what is a degenerative condition by definition. So Becky Farley developed this LSVT Big program. I took that course, and then that's what I initially started implementing as a new physical therapist. And then I continued to work with Becky, and for a while I taught the LSVT Big courses with her. And then she and I saw that there was, a lot of other research. There was now research in boxing and Tai Chi and dancing, and a lot of research that supports aerobic exercise. And so we kind of wanted that program to evolve and to add new and different things. And LSVT Global as a company said, this is research-based, it's a protocol, we want to keep it as is. So Becky stopped teaching for them, and she started Parkinson Wellness Recovery, which is a nonprofit based in Tucson, Arizona, and Power for short, which some of you may have heard of. So they started doing trainings that are the Power Moves courses. And so Power Moves are similar to LSVT Big in that they're both amplitude-based exercises. So the goal is to work bigger and move better and move faster than what comes naturally. And that really can be implemented, within any exercise. But both of these programs kind of have a structure to the types of exercise. So the power moves, partially because they came second, they're, in my opinion, a little bit more sophisticated in kind of the approach, that there are specific things within each exercise that are being worked on that are the things that can change for people with Parkinson's, working on posture, weight shifting and balance, trunk flexibility, and stepping. So I continue to work with Becky because she was really my mentor. So I now work with Parkinson Wellness Recovery as an organization. I teach courses for them and help do an exercise retreat with them once a year. And then 5 years ago, after working in a hospital setting, I saw that there was really more of a need in our community for ongoing access to exercise. Physical therapy is really great. And in most cases, especially in traditional settings like in hospitals, it's somewhat limited. So you go, you have a couple months of therapy, then you're discharged, you're on your own, maybe not knowing exactly what to do or how to do it. And so we saw at the hospital, we started classes and we were actually testing people and showing over the course of 2 years, when people had access to ongoing exercise, supervised and coached and problem solving if any injuries or challenges came up, that people were getting better over the course of long periods of time instead of worse. And so I wanted to expand the classes and I wasn't able to do that there. So I left and started my own business to be able to offer more ongoing access to exercise. So my program is really focused on group classes. Even though I'm a physical therapist, I don't do a lot of one-on-one. We do more classes. We have different types of classes here that we are doing in person up until March, when of course, pretty much everything needed to move online. So at that time, we moved our whole program online for our in-person members. And then we were able to open that up to be an online membership that's available for anyone to join. And then now we're just starting to, be able to get started back with things in person. And then of course, now Southern California is under stay-at-home orders again. So that's done again for a period of time. So we're excited to get started again. But basically I have 13 years of experience working with people with Parkinson's, and I'm super passionate because I see people get better all the time. And I know that, it's just a really effective tool to help people be happier and healthier and really live their best lives while living with Parkinson's.
Good, and tell us about Rogue Online. That's what the business is, right?
Yeah. So we, basically, we had grown to a point for our in-person classes that we had about 25 classes a week, 5 different types of classes at different kind of levels of athletic ability, because it is really important for classes for everyone, whether you have Parkinson's or not, to be at the right level of challenge where you can do the classes and you can be successful, but it's also challenging and pushing you to do more than what you feel comfortable with. So when we first moved online, we started with 1 class a day, 6 days a week. But then over the 9 months that we've been online now, we've added back probably almost half of what our in-person classes were before. We now have online. So we have 2 to 3 exercise classes a day. We have power moves classes, high intensity interval classes, boxing classes. I also have a colleague in the area who teaches dance classes. So we have those on our schedule. We have 1 yoga class a week. And then we have aerobic exercise, actually using equipment. We did a poll and it was about 1/3 of our members either had a treadmill or stationary bike or elliptical at home. And so we now have a class using equipment, really, again, utilizing the research that supports, what we should be doing, how we should be doing it, how we should be monitoring heart rates and things like that. So we have that class as well. And then we also find that, in addition to exercise, things like this, educational meetings, things like that are really helpful. So based on some research from Dr. Mishley and elsewhere, we know that what we eat is really important. We have a cooking class on Mondays where we're learning to make more plant-based recipes. We also have a meeting once a week where we actually watch Dr. Mishley's online content together and discuss it. We have a happy hour. I think that's it. And then we have an educational meeting once a month. So we have kind of a pretty full weekly schedule, and then we record all of that and we have that online that can be used at any time as well. So it's a pretty busy schedule.
Wow, I'll say, and here you are giving us some of your time. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to.
Good. All right, I put that rogueinmotion.com up in the chat window for everybody to see where they can go visit the services that Claire's business offers. So hang on to that, bookmark that. And Nate, let's say hi to you. Tell us about your background and what you're doing.
Yeah, it's nice to meet everybody. My name is Nate Coomer. I live up in the Seattle area, so not too far away, and just got done in our clinic for the day. I'm a physical therapist, graduated from Northwestern 15 years ago. Have always worked in the neurologic setting with patients with brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, strokes, MS, and Parkinson's all along, but really started to become more and more passionate about Parkinson's 8 to 10 years ago, just before we moved out to Seattle from Chicago. Graduated from Northwestern, but met my wife in school, and she's from the Northwest. And so if you know anything about people from the Northwest, they always come back. So we ended up out here. I love it. But just so happened to end up at a hospital that was treating a lot of Parkinson's and had 3 great movement disorder specialists there. And therapists that treat neurologic disorders are not super common. Most therapists focus on sports medicine. So it was kind of a neat place to be and learn about the research that Claire already mentioned behind POWER and LSVT, those acronyms that a lot of people hear about when it comes to Parkinson's. I was able to take a course in POWER back in 2015 out in Montana. And that was kind of, we're talking about apathy and depression and all this stuff today. That was kind of one of those moments where I realized I can do more as a therapist, and I really became motivated and could see if I didn't push in one direction, I was probably going to become a depressed, apathetic therapist. So switched it up and started doing some classes, slowly built a clinic here in Seattle, and always kind of wanted, as I was working with people with Parkinson's, we knew the research was so overwhelming that this should be consistent. It shouldn't just be once a week with your therapist, although that's great, but trying to drive and motivate people, and already knowing about the correlation between apathy and Parkinson's disease. So much like Claire, we have an online platform. That was one way that we thought we could get out to people as well. So we do physical therapy specifically for Parkinson's in our clinics here in Seattle. And we did do classes up until everything shut down here as well. And we've been doing classes online at a website called dailydosepd.com. Very similar. We do classes 7 days a week, and focused on the research and just trying to give people something that guides them. You know, I think a lot of times that's our biggest motivator for me, especially, is I just need somebody pushing me with exercise. So just like anybody else, we're trying to give people good guidance that they can follow along with from wherever they are, whether it's Seattle or anywhere else. So thank you for giving me the chance to talk today.
Sure. Thanks for joining us also. So that's really the introductions. This is where we can start to free flow into questions and answers and responses that, you know, maybe are a discussion more than just a quick answer, but I'll start. I think a lot of us here understand the benefit that exercise brings to us, whether or not we're burdened by Parkinson's. In our case, we are. So we know what exercise will do to trigger more dopamine firing in our system. So we know the why. It's the how that can be challenging, and apathy and getting up off the couch is all about breaking that inertia, right? And so we know in the bottom of our hearts that what I should be doing right now is getting up and going for a run, or dialing into this class or that class. Somewhere along the way, we need to know how to get up off the couch and to sort of remind ourselves. So I'll be looking for whatever sort of real world recommendations you both might have toward getting over that inertia hump. But any other conversations that folks want to have to dive in. So
can I ask a question just among the group here? Because we're all going through this whole year together. Just by a show of hands, you guys don't have to, I mean, you can make a comment if you want, but how many of you have felt like motivation and apathy has crept in more and more over this past year to keep moving?
For sure.
Yeah.
Claire too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been amazing. It's almost like its own research study in itself, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of research come out of this year. But this has been such a tough year in the line of work that Claire and I are in, and with, you know, you guys, I'm sure can speak to this more than we can about how hard it's been to try to find new ways when a lot of people had their exercise routines pretty much set and totally upended by this whole
Right.
pandemic. So
And a lot of it you're forced to be doing in the walls of your, inside the walls of your home, which just makes the inertial wall a little bit thicker and higher, right? So you can get pretty bored pretty quick of doing sit-ups and push-ups and jumping jacks in your family room.
yeah.
What kinds of things do you guys recommend for getting over that wall of inertia, Claire?
I would say, so the way I think about it with regards to motivation in general in life is that the truth is a lot of times we are not really internally motivated to do a lot other than maybe like eat and sleep. But things like getting our education and going to work are things that a lot of us wouldn't necessarily do unless we have some external forces making us do that. Like, I love what I do, but I would not probably do it quite as much if I didn't need to support myself and, you know, pay off USC loans. So one way I look at it is that to expect yourself to be internally motivated to do things, I think is not totally reasonable and is not really how we function most of our lives. Like, you know, to go to school, kids don't, I mean, some kids love school, but a lot of kids don't really want to go to school, but it's just something you have to do. You go to school, you get an education. That's what's going to help you get a job so that you can support yourself. And so I think thinking about exercise too, kind of like that. It's something that we sort of have to do. And what forces can we kind of put in place in our life to help make ourselves do it? Because honestly, like this afternoon, if I hadn't committed to coming and talking to this meeting, I would have, you know, if it was like you just called me at 4 and said, hey, do you want to jump on a call? I'd be like, right now, I don't really want to do that. I'd rather eat a snack or, you know, go lie down on the couch. I'm kind of tired today. So I think to expect like at any given moment that you're just gonna be like, oh, I feel like going and exercising right now, I just think is a little bit unrealistic. So I think it's a matter of putting forces into place, making commitments to people. So one is like when you sign up for classes or an online membership, there's a big difference for us. And you might notice this too, Nate. When people come live, like live stream on classes, it's different than if you go to use a recording. And I think people knowing that like Claire's going to see if my name is there or not. And if she doesn't see my name, she might text or call me and ask why I didn't come to class on a day that I normally come. So I think like social pressure can be very strong. So I think building connections with, you know, those that you exercise with or the classes, or maybe it's a buddy, another person with Parkinson's, where you say, hey, like, we know we're both not really going to be in the mood for this, or one of us might not be. And so let's connect like half an hour before class, say, listen, I'm going to do this. And you both agree to do it. And then you show up together. So I think social pressure is a very helpful motivator. Like you have to make a commitment to someone other than yourself, because in a lot of cases, if it's just up to us doing something that's good for ourselves, like lying on the couch feels better than doing exercise in many cases.
Right.
So that's what I think. I think putting some external structure, you know, having a schedule, like actually writing it down on your calendar, planning out the time, not scheduling other things on top of it, you know, really giving it the space it deserves, making sure you have a little space before the exercise class to get ready for it. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm running late. I don't want to be late for class. I'm just not going to go. Like give yourself time on your schedule, make some sort of commitment to somebody where that if you aren't doing it, someone's going to care and wonder what's happening. I think those kinds of things are actually what we need to support ourselves in those healthy behaviors. And it's great if there's internal motivation, but I think for most of us, there is not a lot of just purely, you know, internal motivation to do things, even though we know they're good for us.
That's great. I like the socializing effect.
I would definitely agree. I've seen the same thing, you know, at the start of it's just like anything else. You have to get into a routine and it becomes addictive over time, which is good. You know, at the start of the pandemic, the live classes, we had people coming in from all over. It was great, but you slowly saw that trickle off as people got into their routine of living in a pandemic. And so the consistency and the routine of it all, I just think is bigger than, you know, some people feel like they have to get, oh, I've got to get an hour of exercise. I've got to get my heart rate, just stay consistent. Let's keep it going over, over this lifetime, and you have to come up with a routine that works for you. Our live classes, yes, definitely. When you can get into an online community, especially, we open up the rooms beforehand, and there's usually people talking. They meet the same time. They build these relationships with each other. It's great. But I have a lot of folks that also just use our recorded workouts, and really they ask what are your recommendations? How do I use this program? And I tell them the same thing. Don't worry about just using, these videos on demand. Make a schedule for yourself. If you're going to do our Tai Chi class, I want you to do your Tai Chi class at the same time, throughout the week, so that you're following your routine that keeps you going. And, trying to set goals like Claire was mentioning, we do different programs throughout the year where we give people reward-based exercise. You tune into so many live workouts, we give you a free month, you get a free t-shirt for being our Daily Dose All-Star and working out throughout the month more than others. So we try to find ways to keep people motivated. But I think at the end of the day, following a schedule is what keeps that consistency going. And I think overall, when we talk about exercise with Parkinson's and staying motivated, the biggest factor we all have to keep in mind is people that continue to move on a regular basis, day in and day out, week in and week out, over years, slow this progression of this disease. And so trying to set these unrealistic goals of I'm going to be 3 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, I think it kills people's motivation over time. There's a serious burnout, especially when you have changes in our life like we've had over this past year.
Well, then there's the element of goals not being achieved, and you get down on yourself for not doing the 3 hours a day of heavy workout.
Yeah, we're doing like a January fitness thing, and we were talking about different goals of every day, having people mark their calendar, and we got down to it. I just want people to mark off that they moved every day. And if you can show that every day you took a walk, you did a workout, you did 30 days straight, that's good. And let's keep the positivity going. I think that helps with motivation in general in life.
I like that. Okay, so we've got socializing and setting goals for exercising a little bit every day. Chad, question from you?
I have a question. So we talked about the apathy towards exercise and getting motivated to do the exercise. And we've talked about the physical benefit of the exercise, but it was Claire, you also mentioned the mental benefit of exercise. And the question I have is from that angle, which types of exercise provide the best enhancements of mood or, mitigation of depression or apathy? Which types of activity? Is it the cardiovascular, the performance-based exercise, or what?
So based on research, it's aerobic exercise, partially just because aerobic exercise is the easiest type of exercise to study. It's the easiest to have people come, to set parameters. When you start doing, exercise that is much more variable, it's a lot harder to organize those studies, to have them happen. So the type of exercise that has the most research really to support it is aerobic exercise. And there are benefits shown in physical symptoms and motor symptoms, in cognitive health, and in mental health. So that's one answer, is research. And then the other answer is, really depends on the person, I would say. So aerobic exercise, I do think, is very important, and we want to do the best we can to kind of be moving in that direction. But then for each individual person, based on either what your goals are or what you like doing, that could vary a lot. So for some people, boxing is amazing for them. Like, they love boxing. It's such a great release to hit things and move your body in that way, and you feel strong. And so for some people, that's very powerful. Some people don't love boxing as a workout. And so if they're kind of pushed towards doing something that they don't really like, that's not going to have the same benefit. Some people love to dance, so for them to do, a dancing, 30 minutes, just turn on music and dance, that is going to be the best mood booster for them. So I think it's both. Aerobic exercise definitely has research to support it. But then the other piece is each individual person is going to have different things that they really like and enjoy. And we want to try to find kind of the balance of those two things. I don't really love it when, like at a lot of conferences, doctors will say, you know, find something that you love and do that. And I do agree with that, but also like we do want to improve areas that are challenging. So if you only do things that you're good at or you like, you may not be addressing some of those deficits that are very important to work on. So I don't think exercise is things where you're always going to love all of the things you're doing, but it should be that if you're really working on challenging things, it's a good challenge, you know why you're doing it, what the outcome could be, and that's really motivating and helpful too. But I do think variety is important, and then, you know, specific types of exercise for different people, depending on what, you know, they like and what they've done in the past, is really important too.
I have a question when it's appropriate.
Judy, chime in.
I turned on my camera for this.
Good for you.
Um, So I'm one of those people who likes to do physical activity. So it's not hard for me. I have a schedule, I stick to it. But I just wondered what other people thought about, I really like that idea that of making a commitment to somebody else, or saying, hey, Sue, I'm going to see you, you know, every Thursday at Pilates or whatever that is. And I just wondered what other folks thought about that idea, and then also thoughts about how would you implement that? Because not all of us know each other or feel comfortable reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, let's, you know, be sure we see each other at boxing on Wednesday or whatever. I'm just curious from the participants.
Judy, if you don't mind, this is Carrie. I'm going to make a comment. I want to say that I always enjoy when I see you at boxing or Pilates. And even though we don't plan it in the head, I feel rewarded by seeing you there and seeing that everything's going so well. So I don't even know if we have to say in advance, let's meet on Wednesday.
Because we're the motivated group.
Yeah. Oh,
So
Well,
we're
there,
the people who
Judy,
this
Judy,
is for
you
like
just
people
did it.
who find it hard to get themselves to class.
Now you've got a
So-
new workout pal in Carrie, Judy, so you guys can text each
Oh,
other
yeah.
30
We're
minutes
gonna go
before the next
paddleboarding.
class.
we're going to paddleboard together when
Awesome.
it gets warm.
Did I say this? I think I've experienced, I think how many of you before this pandemic were in a group or went to did you have a physical therapist that you worked with, or a trainer that you worked with, or a member of a class that you worked, like a trainer, instructor in a class? I think that's a really nice resource to use in the moment, like you mentioned, Judy, because you might be the motivated one, but you know, just in the last week, I can think of one of our clients that we see for PT was talking to us. I mean, she's not motivated. She's got to drag herself in here to work out, and the only reason she comes is because she knows somebody's going to work with her, and you know, she's got there's accountability. Right. But she's in a lot of these. She was participating in Rocksteady. She was participating in one of our classes here, and so she was talking to us about it. And that's, you know, one of the things we did was we could think through our Rolodex of different patients and clients that we've worked with over the years in the community that is more motivated, or even we actually linked her up with one of our other clients that has trouble with motivation, but they both would come to classes because they knew they were accountable to each other. So they've now become their accountability partners, right? And they're trying it out because they're both, you know, going to try this Rocksteady now. They're going to go, okay, we're going to do this online. If you meet up, I'll meet up there, right? But we were able to connect them because we just see more people with Parkinson's disease in our community. And so if you're somebody that's struggling with motivation, even reaching back out to a therapist or a trainer that you've worked with in the past and asking what people are doing, or if they could maybe introduce them to somebody else that might be able to help them out. Because a lot of people are willing to do that. And it does, I mean, it's simple, but it matters. People will go when they know they have to show up, or when they know somebody's waiting on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would be a really cool thing. I think even within your community, with PD Active, is like maybe set up and say, okay, who is motivated and really good at continuing to exercise? Who isn't? Maybe even pair up that way and say, you know, that we're both going to help each other out. We're going to share things, but maybe that's even a way like to reach out to the people who really are struggling to exercise at all, and, you know, kind of work with them and see like what helps. Does it help to share how you feel after you exercise when you do it well, or, and kind of use it as a pilot project to see, how to help other people get motivated. And that's another thing that there's a lot of research that shows that when you help other people, that is huge for mood. And so that's something that if you are someone who's exercising consistently, I think to be able to connect with someone who isn't and help them get on that path to feeling better would be a huge benefit to both people.
One of the
There's a
other
lot of
things-
talk and studies about socialization in general being good for those of us with PD. So
yeah,
element. We had a question.
oh, sorry.
Terry, other than making us feel
Hi.
guilty for working out and during an exercise program, what's your question?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I was sitting at my desk watching this Zoom call when my son came in and said, "Mom, I know you were going to walk on the treadmill today, and I know you haven't done it. You think you could do it while you're listening to this program?" And I said,
Good boy.
"Well, yeah, okay." So I'm in the garage now and I'm listening to it on my phone, but it's nice to try to have maybe another Parkinson's person team up. That's good. But, people are shy or whatever. I mean, somebody that you live with, just ask them to be accountable, for you to be accountable to them. Because I'm trying to do now the more on the treadmill every day. Because I fell and broke my wrist because I wasn't taking big enough steps, and I wasn't exercising every day due to the COVID thing, but a lot of other reasons. So it's super, super important. But just the person that you live with, it doesn't have to be somebody that you call on the phone, somebody that can watch you and say, "Oh," and they can maybe say, instead of saying for you to go on the treadmill, say, "Let's go for a walk around the block," or they say, "You join me." That's sometimes easier.
Yeah. A question for
also
Nate
find-
and Mary. Did you have a question?
You're on mute, Mary.
You're on mute.
Mary, you're on mute.
Still on mute, Mary. We'll wait for you. Here, I can take you off mute.
There. I'd like to make a comment about PD Active in particular, because I think it's actually a unique organization in many ways. And that's one of the reasons why I belong to it. So I go every week to the Tremolos, which is a singing group, and to dance, which the one done by Claudine at Dance Space. And I think that the thing that I like the most about both of those is that people know each other. They've been going there for a long time together, and they look forward to seeing each other, and they have a discussion before and after the training parts of the activity. And it's emphasized to me how important it is to most of the people in those classes that they get connected and they follow through. So several people in the Tremolos group have had brain surgery recently, and as many of you may have as well. And there's follow-up that people bring things to their house, they call them, they check up on them. So there's a whole network of linkage. And I think that the social factors cannot be, the importance of social factors and those kinds of connections cannot be underestimated in its benefit for helping people manage the difficult parts of their lives.
I would agree. I've noticed that, that was a driving force in our classes, and what's been neat to see is we've actually started to try to grow this in each one of our classes, if we have the time, is trying to create kind of an organic social kind of hour, or after the class or even before the class is sometimes better. Trying to tell people, hey, sign in 10 minutes, 15 minutes early, and let's kind of talk. And most of the times we just have to turn on we just have to show our face in there. We don't really have to say anything, and people start to talk. And now it has been this neat thing to see where I'll turn on the Zoom room and everybody's already chatting, and there's people from Colorado and Seattle and Texas, and they're talking about their symptoms and this and that and the weather. And it seems like it keeps them coming back in, because I think they like to they know they're going to get the talking, and then they have to exercise, but at least they get the socialization, which is in a lot of ways just as, if not more important.
Like that. Intentionally building in some time to socialize. That's cool.
Yeah.
And Nate, do you find that works better before class than after class, or?
Well, it used to be cool because afterwards we just let it run and I'd leave. But now we can't. We have to ask everybody to unmute. Now I used to be able to just unmute everybody and start talking again. And so before class now, and I notice now people start to sign in way early and like wait around. It's almost like they're waiting around to see who shows up, And so I think they like to chit chat. And even when we did our classes before, I don't know if Claire, you can talk to this, but sometimes I'd have to like be yelling at, let's go, come on, we got to go. Because everybody was just talking so much beforehand and having a good time. So
especially in this COVID period, where many people are really socially isolated.
Yeah.
I have people on my Facebook page who are sending me, do you want to sign up to be my friend? That kind of thing. It's really, it's very touching. We're all facing this terrible thing right now, and people need each other.
Claire, you talked about variety of exercise. Tell us a little bit more. I'm a proponent of variety of exercises, mostly because I have only exercised when I really enjoyed it in my youth, at least. So playing competitive soccer and playing tennis and skiing, those are things I don't really think of as work or working out, things that I enjoy to do. So it still pains me to run. I only run if I've got a tennis ball I'm chasing down or a soccer ball. But I do love to mix in variety. So when I'm coaching with my kids, I coach soccer, and I make it a point of getting out there and working out with them because I love the game. And now I'm able to, not just enjoy the game and enjoy teaching kids how to play it. I'm getting a workout in at the same time, and I'm helping my PD progress. So speak more about variety. I think there are a lot of people out there, and I might have been among this school in the past myself, who think that it's only really effective if you do the same thing repeatedly day in, day out for X window of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that it's both. Like variety is really important. Some consistency is good because I see like our classes are often kind of a mixture, like some of the same things we've done before, because I do think that becoming familiar with things and really feeling that you're getting better at things, you're able to do more than you were before, and sometimes that takes a while with something challenging. So it is kind of important to do some of the same things consistently over time, because that's how we get better. Repetition is really important.
Delivery of more pads.
And I don't know if I want to mute Terry for just a second. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Terry. So I do think, I'm not answering your question yet, but I do think that repetition is important because that's how we can feel that we're getting better at things and we get comfortable and familiar with things. But then also variety is important to keep things interesting. And then also variety is really important for the brain. So like one of the principles of neuroplasticity, if you're trying to improve connections in your brain, and kind of grow your brain, make it stronger, is novelty is really important. So doing new and different things and your brain kind of having to figure those things out is one of the things that sparks it to function in a new and better and different way. So I think it's really important to have kind of a balance of those two. In my experience in classes, like I will get feedback from people if they've gone and tried classes and it was like a whole new thing every time. They're like, it wasn't that fun because the whole time I was just trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. And they never really felt like they were getting better. But on the flip side, if you do the exact same thing all the time, that can get boring. And so I think it's kind of finding a balance between those two things. And that is, variety both in kind of the type of exercise, the intensity of exercise. Like we know there's lots of research to support high intensity exercise, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you should be doing and that you should be doing that every day. There's a lot of benefit to less intense exercises like Tai Chi and things that are kind of medium or moderate intensity. So that's where I do think it helps a lot to work with a physical therapist. If you have one locally, that's great, going in for kind of ongoing, bouts of therapy when needed. But even having someone like Nate or I online, one of the things, like he was saying, people ask him to kind of help put together a schedule. And that's one thing I get from a lot of the people joining online is they're like, okay, of the things that are available, help me put something together. And so we can look at just the logistics of their schedule. Do they want to join online or, live, or just use recordings? What else are they doing? What are their goals? And then that's what our job is to then think about, based on that person, what kinds of exercise do they need? And we can talk about it a little bit. What do we think they might like and what would they benefit the most from? And then put together that program and have some structure, and then know that may, in a few months, that person might be ready for some new things or want some other variety. But I do think that working with a professional who helps you give a little bit of structure and guidance to things is very helpful, because that's our whole job, is to understand exercise and how it can help and how to get people motivated and do kind of the right kinds of things. So I do think that makes a big difference too.
Good. Any questions by the crowd out there?
I'm sure there are.
Not
Some
right
people are hiding.
Let's see. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. So Claire and Nate, what do you think about the idea of doing things on your own? That you tailor to yourself, to your needs, specific physical needs, say, versus the group class, the class thing, where you don't always find the right level for yourself, but it's close to your level, but it's not exactly right for you. Do both, sort of a balance between by yourself and with others. So.
Go ahead, Nate.
I think it depends on the person too. Some people are pretty self-motivated and can do their workouts on their own. I think, Mike, to Claire's point, not to kind of toot our own horn, but it just is really helpful. I've had a lot of people that come in and say, this is what I'm doing for my home program. And we can take the kind of principles of what we've learned as physical therapists through the research to be important to work into any home program for somebody with Parkinson's, and tailor that exercise that they're already doing. Like, you might already have your program down that you like and pushes you, Mike. But we could look at the impairments that you're having with Parkinson's and say, okay, well, you're doing, push-ups or mountain climbers, or, you're riding the bike. These are the things I want you to think about now when you're riding bike that might make it more tailored to promoting, longevity and slowing the progression of the symptoms of the disease. And here's why you need to think about bigger movements or trying to get your heart rate up to this level, to give you more of a tailored aspect. Like you already say, I might have an exercise routine that I feel really pushes me. That's fine, as long as you're motivated to keep doing it. Works great, but just make sure that you're talking to somebody about everything, because just like myself, I've got exercises that I think are great, but there's a reason I'm not like 2% body fat over here, because I'm sure if a trainer was looking at me, they're like, you could push a little harder. So it's just nice to have that. It's nice to have that, knowledgeable outside voice. Just tweaking things a little bit and taking what you're already doing. And it really is nice to have a professional be like, oh, okay, now I know what I'm focused on. Now I know the meaning of it, makes it even that more important. Now I know how functionally this will carry over. Now I'm more motivated to do it. And if you like, there's some people that just do not like group stuff. And I have to be honest, I'd probably be one of those people. I don't really, I'm more of an introvert when I'm in my house. And it would be tough for me to say, okay, I've got to get over this motivation aspect. I've got to join these groups, and I just feel uncomfortable being watched while I do it. So I get, and I think that if you're somebody that's motivated, that's the only thing I would say. If you're getting in your exercise, that's the big thing, and you're staying motivated. But just make sure you talk to somebody that has some background and knowledge to make sure that you're doing everything you can, because you don't want to waste your time when you're working out. We want it to be as effective as possible.
Right. I like that. And PTs are the ones that have the experience and the training to say, you know, this is the exercise I like to do, and you guys can tell us how to customize that to be able to beat back
have
the symptoms that we're dealing with.
a little bit to add to that too. I think two things I see for people who are very good about exercising consistently is one, they do tend to have like something that they do. They're either a runner or a cyclist, or they have a very specific gym program. And so again, it may be that you're not getting a lot of variety. You have certain things that you do, but you just do those things. And so often, like I'll see someone who's a cyclist and I'm like, oh, we got to do some work on posture and like trunk flexibility. And that's, you know, types of exercise that are maybe not in that person's repertoire really. So I think people who are really good at exercising consistently often have kind of a routine, and we do ideally need to add more variety often to that routine. And then the other thing with Parkinson's is that it does affect not only kind of motor output, but it does affect people feeling how they're moving. And so that is something when you work with someone, Nate was talking about this too, like we give you feedback, whether it's needing to move bigger or move differently in some way. And in that case, I mean, one thing you can do if you're exercising on your own is, you know, have someone take some video of you. Just today, one of our members had sent a video to me for me to use like in a little collage video. He took a video and he sent it to me, and he immediately said, after watching this video, I think I need to see you and like get some feedback on movement. So even videotape of yourself, you could look and be like, that's not quite what that feels like to me. You know, in our physical therapy assessments, when I'm asking people to walk, I ask them to walk kind of a regular walk for them, and then a fast walk and a big walk. And I videotape those and then show them. And people are kind of amazed that like what feels like regular walking to you is a little bit slower and smaller. It may be subtle or it may be a big difference compared to what it feels like to you, but there usually is a little bit of a mismatch. And so that is what our exercise are geared at too, is kind of getting people to move bigger and faster and kind of improve that online processing of how you're moving so that you can move better more of the time.
Fascinating. Trip.
I just want to add another constraint on exercise into the discussion. I have a chronic back pain issue, and it's really affected my ability to do the things that I like the most, that I would most naturally do in terms of exercise, which are mostly outdoor, moving around, walking, hiking, some low-grade tennis. I was in the boxing class when it was meeting in person. And at the moment, I can't do any of those things because of my back pain. And I'm just curious, how do you both, or also members of the group, you know, how do you encourage people to deal with that aspect of getting enough exercise?
Back pain?
So I just, Trip, I just completed a 6-week physical therapy weekly session with some of the guys at Samuel Merritt College. And interestingly enough, on session 4 or 5, I had back pain. And so I asked that same question. I said, we got to like change the agenda a little bit. And one of my real questions has always been with back pain and exercise is how important is it to rest versus to, you know, continue to exercise? And, you know, when is it hurting and when is it helping? And I'm sure, I don't know, you know, Claire or Nate, you guys are the experts, not me, but what these guys told me, and it was reassuring, is if you can exercise, in my case it was tennis, and it doesn't feel worse after you're doing it, you're actually helping your back pain. You know, in other words, the walking and the moving and increases the blood flow, increases the ability to heal. So
If it
I
feels
found
bad
that
at the end of it,
reassuring.
but if it feels bad at the end of it, then it was probably not good for your back.
Yeah, if it feels worse than when it started, is not.
Well, that makes sense. Does that jibe? Is that right?
I think this is like the biggest thing with Parkinson's and exercise, you know, is managing these symptoms. Everybody's got aches and pains as they get older, and trying to figure out the big thing. You're right, Chad, you know, if you're feeling good while you're exercising and feels better when you're moving, then it's probably a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if it feels worse, then at some point you're not going to be able to do the things you want to do and keep active, like Trip's saying. And I've seen that when people are trying to get into new exercises. We talked, a little bit about adding new things in, and this goes back to really wanting to, slowly add those things in to see how your body responds, because injuries are a big part of breaking up that consistency that we talked about before.
Right.
So it sounds, again, tooting my horn, but Trip, getting back to those things if you can. I'm sure, if you've had chronic back pain, you've probably already seen physical therapists for the issue. And if they haven't been able to answer or help you with those questions, sometimes the movement patterns that we adopt with Parkinson's and the rigidity that we have can sometimes contribute to some of the issues with back pain. And if you haven't found relief with conventional physical therapists, and I say conventional meaning like sports med physical therapists, trying to maybe look at it from another aspect of working with a neurologic therapist, somebody that, we say this on these, when I talk on these all the time, I say, find a neurologic, that's not that easy. So looking at outpatient clinics and hospital systems, or asking clinics around you if they have anybody with a neurologic clinical specialty is a good place to start, or finding a power trained therapist, which you can find on the directory at powerforlife.org. Todd, I don't know if you want to put that one up there, but that would be a good place to look online to see if you can find a therapist that might be able to look at your movement patterns from a different perspective. And those patterns often are leading to some of the injuries and the chronic injuries that people keep having. And adapting the exercise can help with that and help you maybe get back to it in some ways. It may have to be modified, but keeping you moving is the biggest thing. And if you're having injuries if you're having pain when you're exercising, that definitely decreases the motivation to keep going. So you almost have to put that as the main priority to see if you can get to a level where you can at least start to get into consistent movement that you enjoy. And maybe spending some time with a therapist that has some knowledge in Parkinson's is a good way to do it. If you can't find that at home, you could even email Claire or I after this. I'm sure we could try to find some resources in your area.
Yeah. And to add on to that too, I would say it's a pretty common thing for people to have pain. And like Nate was saying, there can be just even a mild change in how you're moving, some rigidity that's interfering, or if there's even a slight forward flexion. When you're standing and you're forward flexed, even a little bit at the hip or your back, the muscles on the backside of your body have to work a lot harder to keep you upright. And so it's very common to have low back pain with even just a slight change in posture. So the way I look at it is there's exercises that you kind of need to do to feel your best so that you can go do the things that you like to do, the hiking and the outdoors type of things. So there can be a set of exercises that you probably need to do on a pretty regular basis, a daily basis, to improve your flexibility and posture in your hips, through your trunk. There's a lot that can be done. And those exercises are really important basically to support you in being able to do the things that you enjoy. And it will help your back feel better probably all the time. But that's there are some things that are sort of foundational to exercise, like having pretty good just general fitness by doing some aerobic exercise. And then I'd say the other aspect is active flexibility, not stretches where you're like holding your leg up in the air for 30 seconds or holding positions. It's that you really have to be doing exercises for mobility where you're moving through them consistently, because that's what really helps those muscles stretch out and then work better in that way. So yeah, it's very, very common for people to have back pain. And I think right now with the pandemic, like first there was staying at home, and then maybe you started to be able to get out. But after even like a few weeks of not doing your normal activities, your fitness levels and things change. Unfortunately, that happens really fast. We get out of shape very quickly. And so if you had, a period of time where you didn't do those things and then you tried to go back to them, from a PT perspective, it's not surprising at all that you couldn't just jump right back to those things and how you were doing them before. And now you probably need to do a few foundational things to kind of get you back to those things. But I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to get back to doing those things that you were doing before.
Good, great. Trip, I have my own little 2 tips for you. One is a great set of exercise or stretches for my back that PTs gave me at Kaiser years ago that I built into a regular morning regimen. I do that every day, whether I'm going to work out right after that or not. But for sure, when I'm going to, before I'm going to work out, I'll do a set of back stretches. So stretching. And the other is, and this is where I disclaim that I'm not a doctor, but I'm a believer in and user of CBD lotions and tinctures. So when my back was hurting, I had bad lower back pain, I would rub a CBD lotion on that, and it would provide some relief. So happy to talk more about that offline if you want.
Thanks, all of you.
So there's been talk about this, the bigness, the largeness of the movements. LSVT big and loud, and power, of course, PWR, of course, we know is about big movements. Can you both tell us a little bit? I mean, I think many of us here understand that we've heard, or have at least heard that the bigness of the movement is important for PD sufferers. I just don't know how and why. So if you can give us a little bit of background around that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so it's kind of two-part. One is that bradykinesia, so that slowness of movement, that is one of the cardinal symptoms of Parkinson's. You have to present to a neurologist with bradykinesia to receive a diagnosis of Parkinson's. And the speed of our movements and the size of our movements are very interrelated. So what happens kind of even early on, it's usually a symptom even pretty early in diagnosis when symptoms may be relatively mild, but movements usually have become a little bit slower, a little bit smaller. And the problem is that functionally, there's kind of a certain amount that we need to move to be the most efficient. So for something like standing up from a chair, we need to shift our weight from our hips onto our feet at a certain speed, a certain amount with a certain efficiency. And if that is even slowed down a little bit or decreased in size by a little bit, then you're not gonna be able to stand up easily from that chair. And so people will start to notice, like moving around in bed is one of the earliest things that I hear from for a lot of people. They won't really notice a lot of other functional changes throughout the day, but overnight moving around in bed, it's hard to move and get comfortable. And it's often that movement is happening just a little bit too slow and too small. So there's quite a bit of research that shows that. And then the second piece is what I was talking about before with kind of that mismatch. The difficulty in feeling how big your movements are. So part of it is that the movement output is a little bit slower and or smaller, and your brain doesn't really notice that. So it may be because it changes so slowly and subtly over time that your brain is just kind of reorganizing and getting used to how you're moving. Or it may be that there's actually kind of the sensory side of the brain might be affected a little bit by Parkinson's. We're not really sure. But people will come in with dramatically shorter steps. And if you ask them, they say, it feels comfortable. This feels like my regular walking. And you show them a video and they're like, that's what I look like when I'm walking. Like it does not feel the same. So there is a mismatch. So through practicing bigger movements, we are both trying to be as Parkinson's specific. So we're saying if that is one of the cardinal symptoms of Parkinson's, we want to make sure that we're doing exercises that directly affect that thing. So yes, strengthening is important, but Parkinson's does not directly cause weakness. Strengthening is good for all of us, but we're trying to be as efficient and sophisticated with our exercise as possible by saying, what is the root of kind of the problems that people experience maybe a little bit at the beginning, and then as physical therapists, we work with people all along. So we also know what can happen later. And by working with you early on, we are trying to prevent you from experiencing those more significant challenges later. So we're saying if we can get you moving bigger and faster now, keep your movements efficient, keep you really functional, we get and practice that over your lifespan, ideally we can keep you being able to do all those things. And that we have to be kind of recalibrating your brain as we go along. So it's not just a matter of you moving bigger. We want you to move bigger, and we want that to feel comfortable to you so that you do that all the time, not just when we ask you to move bigger or better. That you realize, if you move bigger at home, you're going to stand up from chairs easier, even a low surface or a soft surface. You're going to be able to move around in bed easier. You're going to get up and down from the floor easier. You're going to get dressed easier. How big and fast your movements are affect every single movement and thing that you do throughout the day. And the more efficient you are for all of those things, the easier and better your life is. You get up, you get out of bed, you get dressed, you shower, all those things happen much more efficiently and smoothly, and you have more time to do the rest of the things that you want to do throughout the day. Does that make sense?
It does. It sounds like over exaggeration for the sake of reaching a normal.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I can,
And
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So we all know we started to observe these things, or neurologists observed these things in us before we started taking our meds. And then if you take the Cinemet, especially when you're in peak dosage, or maybe you flex it and you take a little more sometime, the symptoms naturally get significantly reduced or go away. And so the question I have is there, so, you know, many of us resist taking the Cinemet for a while, and, you know, because we want to improve our functionality as much as possible in a low dopamine situation. If we take a lot of Cinemet, it's not as hard to do the big motion and to walk normally. So the question I have is, you know, we can all take more Cinemet or a lower dosage of Cinemet, and we all have cycles throughout the day when we have more in our brain and less in our brain. And so is it better to exercise when we are dopamine challenged and to challenge ourselves a little more, as long as we can do it, or when we're fully loaded with dopamine because we're at the maximum of our regular cycle, or maybe we're, you know, taking a little more than normal and it's not as challenging?
good question. On versus off.
Yeah.
So most of the research is pretty clear that we get better if we're trying to practice good movements when we're exercising. If we're trying to practice good movements when we're exercising, if we want, bless you, if we want the best movement when we're exercising, we should try to practice those movements when we're moving our best. So the research is pretty clear that the more optimized we can be with our medications around our exercise, the better impact our exercise has. So, you know, that's always easier said than done with a lot of people who have fluctuations in their medications and on-off times that are really significant. Exercise is still beneficial, but if you can pair exercise with your best periods of functioning throughout your dose cycles, it is for the better. So in terms of, like you said, Chad, trying to force through it on a low dopamine state, probably not as beneficial as working when you're feeling and moving really good, and probably moving with bigger size, because again, we're trying to practice amplitude with like these power moves and things we do in our workout classes. It's all based around functional movements. Like Claire said, being able to step over that threshold into your bathroom shower, being able to get up and down off of low surfaces. That's what our squats and lunges and things like that are all focused around. So if you're practicing those movements with the best quality, hopefully we get that carryover when you need to use it in real life. And so we really don't want to be practicing when we're kind of off. Yeah. I don't know, Claire, if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, man, I have so many things I like to say about everything. So yeah, I totally agree. That's really when kind of the best exercise happens, often that you feel your best and move your best. But I would say it's not terrible to exercise in different states and kind of see if you're in an off state where it is then really uncomfortable or you're really struggling, that it can be a demotivator too. So I don't think that that is ideal, but there's some really interesting interactions that can happen with kind of medication cycles and exercise. And I actually have some pretty, you know, cool experiences of people feeling off and then starting to move and saying, okay, I'm going to go for a walk or do some exercise. And it actually helps them feel better and come on. So Terry, who I think might have just left the meeting, she's actually someone, she lives down here. Oh, there you are, Terry. And we know each other. And so we have done, like, for her, we do our assessments as part of our classes for our local members. And, you know, everybody wants to come and do their assessment when they're on because they want to perform their best. And that's totally normal. But for people who are experiencing those fluctuations, I will often recommend to people, let's do an assessment when you're off, because we want to know, what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like to you? How different is it? Because there's research showing that a person's quality of life is more closely tied to the worst that they function throughout the day, not the best. You know, when we feel good, it's like, great, we feel good. But if you're not feeling good, and depending on how much time you spend feeling like that, that can really impact your quality of life. So with exercise, we're not only trying to push up your ceiling, but we're trying to bring up your floor as well in terms of kind of what's the worst you feel throughout the day. So medication optimization is important, but exercise can help bring up that floor. And for Terry, when we scheduled and did her off assessment, so we had her come in late in the afternoon at like 5 p.m. when she's tired throughout the day. It's the time that her medication wasn't working well. It was the end of her cycle right before she was due for her next dose. And we started moving, and about 15 minutes into the assessment, she all of a sudden was moving a lot better, and she had not taken any more medication. And so I actually think movement is something, you know, when you can do things that you're familiar with and that feel good and kind of get the blood flowing, that can actually help you be less off. And sometimes offs can be more of like you not feeling well and even non-motor symptoms in addition to motor, and movement can actually be something that's really helpful in that case. So I do think it's something that's, you know, there's many layers and it's more complex than we realize, but that's why it's helpful to work with someone in that case too, because it might be interesting to see what is your off. I have a woman I work with who's had Parkinson's for 33 years. She's 83 years old. And she has very significant offs. But when she's on, she does great, but she will be off, unable to stand up, so rigid in her muscles that I need to physically assist her. And I help her get on a treadmill, which many people would think like, that's dangerous. Why would you do that? But the treadmill is something that she's familiar with. And when we start the treadmill at a slow speed, it actually facilitates movement, and it can get her out of an off that causes rigidity and stiffness throughout her whole body where she can't even transfer on her own. But exercise can get her out of that. So it's just pretty cool to see what exercise can do. So I think, yes, you in general want to exercise when you're feeling your best, when you can do your best, but I also think you can actually kind of use movement and exercise as a tool to feel better and actually have better ons, even when you're feeling off.
So in other words, I should exercise in the off, exercise in the on, and everything in between too, I should exercise.
You should be
Well, you can also,
I got it.
It may not be exercise, but you should be moving, and that will help.
No, I know. That's great.
I mean, peeing in the middle of the night is a good exercise. It could motivate you. You get out of bed.
Mary, I think you have a question, but you're in mute. No?
Mute off on. Claire, so why does that happen? Is the exercise increasing the output of L-DOPA in that case?
So,
what's the mechanism?
Yeah, so there is research prior to, like, I think it was just 2019. Prior to 2019, there wasn't actually any research that showed that exercise caused an increase in dopamine production. Prior to that, all the research really showed that exercise improved efficiency of dopamine use, and it, like the research out of USC showed that receptors could improve their efficiency, a number of receptors, but there wasn't a lot of research actually that said that you produced more of your own dopamine. Medication and exercise together are very important. But in 2019, the first study was published that actually showed people who were doing aerobic exercise on a consistent basis did have an increased production of dopamine after a bout of aerobic exercise. So you kind of needed two things. You needed to be doing it on a regular basis, and then you needed to do it that day to get the increase in production. But that was really exciting because that was the first time that was shown and published. But for this woman that I was talking about, so for her, we were not doing high intensity exercise, or we weren't doing the type of exercise that research said increased dopamine. I think it's that why exactly that happens, I'm not 100% sure. I think that it's, you know, our bodies were made to move and kind of interact with our environment. And I think Parkinson's, you know, does cause akinesia. It causes this decrease in movement. And I think part of it is that volitional movement of kind of getting that movement started yourself. But when there's something like a treadmill or even a bike where there's, you know, the pedals, a stationary bike, you know, it's kind of supporting you and allowing to get your body moving under kind of safe circumstances. In that case, I think it's more of just the brain kind of remembering what movement feels like and that it feels good. I honestly don't know exactly what's happening in the brain in instances like that. I really see it work best with movements where it's something that someone is familiar with. If I ask them to do something new and different when they're off, that does not usually go well. But if there's a set of exercises that they're comfortable with, even starting with some stretches on the mat, or sometimes if we facilitate a little bit of movement, or the bike or the treadmill, those I really see as being very facilitative for movement, but I honestly don't know exactly why that's happening. I don't know if you know, Nate.
Well, I mean, the research is pretty clear. When we start moving, we push dopamine into our motor centers. We use the dopamine that we have left in our brain more efficiently. We increase blood flow, decrease inflammation, bring nutrients to the brain. So just like, I mean, you guys should feel, I hope, you know, those of you, you all seem like you're pretty active. I hope you feel the benefit within your exercise routine, that you feel better and maybe move better after you're done. So, you know, like Claire was saying, I mean, people come into our clinic in all kinds of different states in their med cycles. I know the research says we should work out in our on cycles, but it's really hard to make that work for some folks. So we just work out anyways. Mm-hmm. And they still, by and large, say they feel better when they're done and really move better when they walk out of here. I mean, I see it on a daily basis anecdotally, but I know what's happening in the brain with the research makes sense, that even though we're not increasing the amount of dopamine, we're using it more effectively. I always talk about it as, when I'm talking to people, is like we go from a brain that's like a Hummer to a brain that's like a Prius. You know, we're just using the dopamine we have more effectively, and it's getting pushed to the areas of our brain that help with movement. So, you know, I hope that kind of helps, Mary.
So do you think that exercise would increase dopamine production on a regular basis? Can you cure your deficit by exercising?
There isn't really research that shows that you can cure a deficit. You definitely can improve, and that the amount of improvement people can experience can be very, very significant. And that's something, it's different for every person. You know, research shows that by the time someone is demonstrating motor symptoms of Parkinson's, there is already a 50 to 80% loss of those dopamine producing cells. So that's the good news, is the brain has done an amazing job while things have been changing for a long period of time. But once you have motor symptoms, that's not really like the beginning of Parkinson's. That is more kind of the middle stage of Parkinson's. There are things that have been happening probably for a while before that. So I would never use the word cure, but I would say it's pretty amazing what is possible. And someone like Terry here, she went from being pretty significantly affected by Parkinson's, having a lot of bradykinesia, to making amazing improvements and being able to do things like jump rope that she had not done in decades. So I see amazing, amazing improvements. Did that mean her Parkinson's was cured? No. Did she still experience symptoms? Yes. Were there still challenges? Yes. But was she doing so much better than before? And has she now maintained that? You know, now being 11 years into her diagnosis, she's still in better shape than she was right before she was diagnosed? Yes. Even with an injury, a fall and a fracture, she still was able to get right back and do pretty amazing things because of having this kind of baseline of training. So how much better people can get, I personally don't think we know the ceiling of that yet. But it makes a huge, huge difference. And I do think it definitely can slow, well, it's not proven by research, but I believe that exercise can definitely slow the progression of Parkinson's, you know, and change the trajectory of how well you can do over the long period of time. And there's lots of research that shows that the more active people are and the more they exercise, they're able to take less medication while still having good on times and not needing as much medication over time, which is where some of the challenges can come in with side effects and fluctuations. So we definitely can help people stay active, fit, try to keep medications as low as possible. And there's more and more research coming out about that. And then, you know, people like Nate and I, who spend all our time exercising with people, we see these things happening on a very regular basis.
Great. I'm going to give a time check here. We're 6 or 7 minutes away from conclusion, sadly. It's gone zipping by, and I want to make sure that folks have all had a chance to raise any questions or concerns they've got. Terry and Peg, I see you both raising hands. Peg, why don't we start with you, and we'll come back to you, Terry. Hold on a second, Peg. I'm going to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself there, Peg? You see the mute button? There you go. Now you're with us. Go for it.
I have had Parkinson's. I was young onset Parkinson's disease. and I've had it for 25 years. And I have really believe in exercise, but there was a point when I developed dyskinesia that kind of put a brake on that because I found it impossible to exercise regularly with, pretty constant dyskinesia. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions. I have been attending a class that involves a lot of power moves and everything has been very, very helpful. And I noticed that I have a better body awareness. I didn't realize, but I was really tilting to the left and I mean to the right, and I'm so much more mindful of my movement now.
So you're still exercising with power? Is that what you said?
I'm in a class called PD Connect. I'm on the internet, and they use a combination of power and what Claire was talking about, lots of variety, lots of different things, and it's great. I'm definitely the lowest functioning person in the class, but I've seen an incredible improvement in the last 6 months. I'm in the class 4 to 5 times a week.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I would say regarding the dyskinesia, really continuing to look closely at your medications. And it's true for some people, especially who've had Parkinson's for longer, that therapeutic window between being on and being dyskinetic can become a very small window. But I believe that there are really endless tweaks that you can continue to do with your medication, working with your neurologist. And since you're maybe noticing some improvements now, it may be that you could look at tweaking your medications a little bit. And medications don't always have to go up. Sometimes they can go down a little bit. You can adjust things like your dose and the timing to help with those things. And also notice, are there any other things that sort of trigger dyskinesia? Are there other things you can implement like meditation and mindfulness that help your system calm down, because that can improve it? There is research out of Italy that they took people specifically who were having bothersome dyskinesia, and they put them in an intensive exercise program, which was actually 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for a month, not forever 3 hours a day, but for a month. And I think, making sure that you're doing things like functional exercises, like power moves and others, potentially seeing about what you're doing in terms of aerobic exercise. And is there something you could do like a stationary bike or something safely? And they put people into this study. They exercised them so intensely, really, that basically people were functioning better and were able to go down on their doses of medication without going so low that it was functionally, didn't work for them. They didn't cause them to have, be in more of an off state all the time, but they were able to reduce medication. So there is research that shows that exercise really can influence how much medication you need, help bring it down. And so I do think there's really endless potential to both, keep improving your exercise program, potentially adjust your medications over time along with that, and, be a new case study for what is possible for people.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that every day is a different, experience, and I've learned to be very adaptable, and I've used mindfulness, that helps, and I'm on recovery, and that I'm on maximum dose, so I can't take any more, and it's still a problem that I have diaphasic dyskinesia, so I have it when I don't have enough cinnamon, if I have too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really challenging, but it's something it can continue to be modified over time. You can keep working on it.
Yeah, and in this class, they said if you don't feel comfortable in standing, do them sitting. But I do mostly do the program in sitting, but it works pretty well.
Good.
Great.
That's great, Peg. All right, well, before we sign off, Cherry, you still had a question. I would love to, you're the poster child for Claire's program here, so let's
I just wanted to make a comment about working out when you're off. Actually, I want to make a comment about self-talk and attitude. For me, self-talk and attitude has been really huge. And I was having some conversations with Claire that I didn't think I could exercise well when I was off. And so then that's when she said, well, why don't you come in for an assessment when you're off? So we always did the 6 months assessments. We have a date set up every 6 months where she runs through these assessments that take about an hour. And it's at like 7 o'clock in the morning. So then she said, well, come on in this afternoon and we'll do it. And so we did one at 4:30 in the afternoon. At the end of the day, I had to drive like 40 minutes in traffic to get to the gym. My next dose of medication was at 5:30. I was sure I was going to do terrible. And she's right. I did great. After the beginning of my brain was saying, you're going to do terrible, you're not going to do great. After I learned to not listen to my brain and just let my body do what it wanted to do, I started doing really, really well. And we have done this assessment, I think maybe 3 times over like 18 months, every 6 months for 18 months. And consistently, I do very well when I'm off. So I think that for me, a lot of times my brain can talk me out of stuff. Oh, you're too tired. Oh, feel really good to lie down on the couch and have a cup of tea. Don't you want to read this book? Oh, you got to watch the next episode or whatever. And you know, all this stuff is talking over my body. When I can learn to, what I say, shut my brain off over here and let my body do the work, it's entirely a different thing. And I have actually a tape of music that I made that I really like. And I play that music because that occupies my brain. So then my body can do the work. So just be careful, everybody, that your brain doesn't talk you out of doing something that your body really wants to do and really needs to do.
Great. So you're saying that positive attitude over negative self-talk.
Yeah, because it's really powerful.
Good. Excellent. That feels like a pretty good note to end on. Are there any other final questions before we dash away? Anybody that's been mute and video off that wants to chime in, you're welcome to. We'll give it another few seconds here, but don't see any hands raising and no questions flying in through chat. So let me paste in here one more time these great URLs for these fine people that have been taking good care of us today. Daily Dose and Rogue Online, or Rogue in Motion. Claire and Nate, thank you very much for taking the time. We know you're both very busy, but you guys have a great and valuable perspective into this world that we're all living in and trying to cope with, especially in light of a lockdown and a quarantine like this. So we value your expertise and your years of experience, and thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for moderating, Todd. Thank you.
Yeah, folks, thanks a lot for joining us. We will talk again soon, but I hope you all stay safe and moving. Take care. Good night.
Thanks. Bye all.